it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Sam Sebastian. Sam is the Managing Director of Google Canada. He and his family moved to Canada a couple of years ago, and he is now responsible for leading the team here to work with Canadian businesses of all sizes to realize the economic potential of the web. Sam tells me that he just got in on a red-eye from California, so jazzed and ready to go, full of adrenaline. We are delighted. Please join me in welcoming Sam Sebastian.
I need coffee instead of water. I'm full of coffee. Good morning, bonjour. Before I start with my comments, I thought I would give you a little bit of context on Google in Canada. Google's 18 years old as a company, and we've been here in Canada for 14 years. Toronto was one of our first international offices that was opened, and over the last 14 years, we've had a lot of jobs. We put a lot of Canadians to work. We've got about 1,000, we call them Canooglers, here in Canada, about 600 across 4 different offices. We've got about 600 software engineers, mostly in Kitchener-Waterloo, but also 75 or so in Montreal. I've been at Google for about 10 and a half years, and I moved up here about 2.5 years ago to run our Canadian operation. Originally from the US. I took my English test last week for permanent residency, so wish me luck. But the last year and a half has been pretty cool. I feel like I've got a front row seat to what feels like a Canadian renaissance. Drake, The Weeknd, a pretty hip prime minister. The Jays are winning. The Raptors are winning. The Leafs will win. Canada is suddenly hip, and we're having a moment. But it feels like the moment is much more profound. When I talk to my American friends about this, I usually kick off with about a 15-second geography lesson, and because in the U.S., as many of you know, we tend to think about just the U.S., and so whenever I talk to my friends back home, I have to explain what the heck Canada is. It's more than just Niagara Falls, where they went on a trip once. But I talk about how with a population of California, but over a vast landmass the size of Russia, our economy has been defined by what we pulled out of the ground. The biggest exporter of oil to the U.S., that's us. Vast geography, loads of resources, facts that might shape a nation's identity, if not its destiny. But it doesn't feel that way in Canada right now, at all. We're no longer a place defined by the limits of physical geography. Our future potential does not lie beneath Canadian bedrock. It lies in our universities, in our startups, in our incubators, and in our research institutions. And when it comes to innovation, unlocking this potential at a global scale has to be one of Canada's top priorities. As someone new to the country, but also someone who's been in the tech space for almost 20 years, I'd love to share 3 observations. One big risk, but 3 observations on innovation and kind of my perspective, again, being here the past 2.5 years. My hope is that they're particularly relevant as we define this moment together on innovation in Canada. The first is this concept of thinking exponentially. Larry Page, our CEO, rejoined as the CEO 5 years ago. Let me explain that. When Larry Page and Sergey Brin started Google, they were 20-something years old. They needed a grown-up to run the company. They hired Eric Schmidt, and the first 10-plus years of the company, the company was run by Eric Schmidt. About 5 years ago, Larry Page tapped Eric on the shoulder and said, "Nice work. You built a pretty cool company, but I'm going to take over again." The morning of the first day he was announced as our new CEO, he sent an email to all the Googlers in the company. And we were a pretty successful company at the time. We were the IT company. We had grown to be very, very large. And the first sentence said, "Guys, we are moving way too slow. We've become a big company." Sergey and I built this company to change the world through technology. We built this company to organize the world's information. We built this company to take major moonshots, to think 20 times versus 20%. We're thinking incrementally. We're moving too slow. We need to think exponentially. 5 years later, we have 7 products that reach over 1 billion users each. We've got a moonshot factory called Google X that's building innovations like the autonomous vehicle and many other things you'll see over the next coming years. It changed the trajectory of our company, which was already on a decent trajectory, because we thought we were thinking much bigger. How does this exponential thinking apply to Canada? We're a country of 35 million people. The internet reaches 3 billion people worldwide. That will double in the next 5 to 10 years, probably 4 to 5 years. Our market is not Canada. Our market is the world. The opportunity to scale beyond our borders has never been greater. Digital can take the friction out of the ability to export and take your goods on the road. Let me give you 3 really good examples. Manitoba Mucklucks, a Winnipeg company. Does everyone know Mucklucks? In fact, I think the Minister Freeland gifted a pair to the EU Trade Commissioner at the CETA signing. So this company was a Canadian company for the first 15 years of its operation. In 2012, they decided that they wanted to start looking outside of Canada. First thing they did, they talked to Shopify. They lit up their website for e-commerce ability. They then reached to us and said, all right, how do you help us market our company to the world? 4 years later, they're operating in 45 countries. A third of their website traffic comes outside Canada. That's exponential thinking from Manitoba Mucklucks. You've heard from Toby, you've heard from Harley, Shopify, 1,500 employees, 300,000 merchants, 150 countries. If you ask Toby or Harley, are you a Canadian company? They'll say no. We're a global company that's headquartered in Canada. They just happen to have a few customers in Canada. But they're building the company here, but it is a global company. That's where their focus is. Has anyone heard of Lily Singh? Ask your sons or daughters, they'll know. Lily Singh is a YouTube star, a YouTube creator. She's a hometown gal. She was born and raised in Scarborough. A few years ago, she started putting a few videos up on YouTube. A few years later, now she has 10 million subscribers. 10 million folks follow her on the web every time she posts or says something. But here's the thing. She's Canadian, but 90% of her views on YouTube come from outside Canada. This is typical. Most of the Canadian creators who are telling their stories on YouTube, 90% of their stories are being taken in by folks all over the world, not just in Canada. We've got great stories, we've got great creators, we've got great talent. We just need to take it on the road a bit more. Huge upside, huge opportunity, but we still have a lot of work to do. We have over 1 million small to medium businesses in Canada. Only half of them have a website. 1 in 20 are actually set up to export. Huge opportunity for exponential thinking in Canada right now. But here's the one big risk I see. And I think, I just got here, but I think you guys have been talking about this a little bit over the past couple of days. If you believe the premise that every company will be a software company over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, which is the truth. If you look at any auto company, any oil and gas concern, any retail company, the infrastructure that drives and operates that company is built on software. Do we have the pipeline of talent in this country to meet this demand? That's a massive question. I think we're actually fine for the next 5 or 6 years. We have the best universities in the world. The number 2 recruiting engineering university for us to recruit from worldwide at Google is the University of Waterloo. Worldwide. 60% of our employees based in Kitchener-Waterloo come from the University of Waterloo. Another 20% from the University of Toronto. Great universities all over the country. We've got a fast-track work permit that was just approved. That's going to bring more talent to the country that we need. We've got startups that are scaling, that are creating jobs. The next 5 to 10 years, I feel pretty good about. My concern is the next 20 years. 98% of all of the engineers at Google have had some exposure to computer science before university. I talk to these guys and gals, not as many gals as there should be, mostly guys, about this all the time, and ask them where did they get their inspiration? Why did they take this line of work? And it wasn't one big moment. It was a series of sparks. It was a series of aha moments. It was a series of exposure to the magic of science over the course of their lifetime. It was a math camp. It was a science fair. It was a first computer that their dad bought them. Canadian children right now, kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, they need more of those sparks. They need more of those aha moments. You heard from Actua, Jen Flanagan, earlier today. We partnered with Actua a couple of years ago with the goal of creating more sparks. We taught 125,000 Canadians over the last 2 to 3 years how to code. Not only how to code, but how to think computationally, algorithmically. It's not just about coding, it's how you think. This is extremely important, and it can't just be the Actuas of the world. They need about 10 times more funding than they have now, and we need more Actuas, but we also need to get this into the classroom. I don't know if I know it's provincial, but it has to take everyone pulling together to make sure that we've got a pipeline of talent for when every company is a software company, and we need that type of talent in this country. So my first observation is let's continue to think bigger, think exponentially, but let's be careful about that major risk that we have as well. Number 2, feed the winners. We've talked about this a little bit this morning as well. We are seeing success in this country in entrepreneurialism, in the startup environment. We're seeing ambition. Folks are scaling up and they're staying put. You've heard from Toby at Shopify. We've got Ted Livingston building a great platform company called Kik. You heard from Michelle at Clearbank. Mallory and Lauren are great 2 young female founders in Kitchener-Waterloo building a great company called Bridget. Stephen Lake at Thalmic. Ryan at Hootsuite out in Vancouver. We need to talk more about this success. We don't do this nearly as much as we should in Canada. We do it too much in the US, I get that. Somewhere right in the middle would be the nice balance. It was referenced a couple of times up here, I think the last couple of days. We put on an event last week called Go North with 3 goals. The first was to talk a little bit about the challenges of being an entrepreneur and a technical startup person in this country, to take stock a bit, but most of the time was spent to celebrate success, to promote the great entrepreneurs that we have here, to put them on stage. We need more role models instead of Zuckerberg and Larry and Sergey in California. We have great role models here. We just need to talk about them more, hold them up. But let's also then invest and feed the ecosystems and the clusters that created these success stories. Kitchener-Waterloo, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa. And invest in the infrastructure here. Double down on the incubators and the accelerators, the research institutions that matter, that work, that are big enough. We can't peanut butter spread this all over the country. It just won't work. We don't have the scale. We've got a couple of sectors here where we can lead the world. Artificial intelligence and machine learning research started in Montreal. We have some of the best researchers in the world. The godfather of AI is in our office in Toronto. We've got these sectors and clusters that we can invest in, but let's feed those winning sectors that can really make a difference. I joined the board of Tennis Canada about a year ago. This is the perfect story. 15 years ago, the state of professional tennis in Canada wasn't that bright. And Tennis Canada changed their model, and Tennis Canada has to compete with the US, Australia, the UK, folks that have Grand Slam tournaments. But we just don't have the resources. And so we totally changed our business model to focus the resources we did have, at least from a professional development perspective, on the top 10 juniors in the country. No more. We took all of our investment and focused on building an amazing pipeline and fed the best and the brightest. And if you look at Milos Raonic, he was a product of this system. We won the US Open Junior Tournament this year. Felix, Dennis won Junior Wimbledon. We have 2 kids, 16-year-old kids in the top 10 in the world in junior tennis, and number 7, Bianca, in the juniors. We took that business model because we don't have as much scale as a lot of other countries around the world, but we fed the winners and we focused on our success stories. Observation 2, feed the winners. Observation 3, we don't even have to work this hard at this because it comes naturally. It's our secret weapon. It's the shared sense of community that makes us Canadian. It's a huge asset when we're talking about innovation, and I'm convinced this is a market differentiator for us. The highest concentration of startups in the world behind Silicon Valley is in Kitchener-Waterloo. That didn't happen overnight, but it happened because it had a handful of ingredients, unbelievable universities, a few anchor tenants. BlackBerry and RIM were there for a while. Google Canada built up a big presence there. Lots of startup activity, incubators, research institutions, the government and the city leaned in. But the most important ingredient was this concept of community that has lifted up this region and this sector over the years. When you come from Silicon Valley and you work there, it is a dog-eat-dog world. It is tough. Kitchener-Waterloo, everyone lifts up one another. Folks aren't going and gouging each other for talent. If one startup wins, they feel like everyone wins. This is a Canadian ideal, and I'm convinced it's critical for us from an innovation perspective, and again, is a major market differentiator. And you see these Canadian ideals so clearly now when you compare them to all the other shit that's going down in the world. The Brexits, the walls. This is the perfect time to be doing things like this here in Canada. The attitude that we have being Canadian applies as much, if not more, to how we do business, how we build things, and it cuts across all sectors and demos. It's a sense that we're building something together. It's a sense we see diversity as an asset. Our coworkers and even peers, our friends, one of my best friends in the country over the last 2.5 years is the head of Facebook. Who would have figured that? I'm not supposed to like Facebook. And we cheer Canadian wins as if they're our own. Canada needs to think big. We need to look at what's working and feed it accordingly. But when it comes to innovation, our shared sense of community may be Canada's greatest market differentiator and our secret weapon. Full stop. Steve Woods runs our engineering R&D department in Kitchener-Waterloo. He came back home 8 years ago after founding a few successful startups in the valley. He describes what we have in Kitchener-Waterloo, where he's based, in this community, this technical, this entrepreneurial community, and Canada, as the equivalent of capturing lightning in a bottle. Getting back to this idea of Canada's moment, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Together, we've captured lightning in a bottle, and together, in this moment, we can use it to shape Canada's future. Thank you very much for having me here today.